Uncle Bernie, and I'm not talking Sanders, has dabbled in plenty of projects during his short stay on this earth. Known as one-fourth of the certified kings of comedy, an actor, producer, among all of his many accolades, his role as a father to his daughter, Je'Niece McCullough, has been his most important role to date. Contrary to his role on his self-entitled series, The Bernie Mac Show, people weren't even aware that Bernie had an actual daughter off-screen. Years after her father's unfortunate passing, Je'Niece spoke about her relationship with Bernie in a podcast interview, briefly touching on her father's aggressive parenting style growing up. According to Je'Niece, her dad, in short, was semi-verbally abusive, tormenting her with words such like weak and soft. The two's overall dynamic as a father and daughter duo just didn't seem to be the fantasy-like image she'd yearned for growing up. So, exactly how rough was Bernie's parenting style? Love or hate him, podcasts seem to be the new it thing and are here for the long run. Anyone, including their mamas, sisters, and aunties, can make a podcast and sound off on any and all topics of their choosing, no matter how crazy, insincere, or absurd their opinions may be. In post-2020, it seemed like many people started coming out of the woodworks. People we haven't heard or seen since LaToya and Latavia were still in Destiny's Child. But I guess since that 2020 period, people had no choice but to sit and ponder on their lives and past events. Bernie Mac's daughter decided to hop on the bandwagon, disclosing details on the Can We Talk podcast regarding what her and her father's relationship was like growing up, further discussing parental wounds and trauma. Although she didn't quite go into great detail about the ins and outs of her upbringing, she decided to share incidents concerning Bernie's parenting style. I mean, no one really asked, but we're more than willing to receive. Despite Bernie being a hoot and a riot on stage while in his comfort zone, offstage was a different vibe. Before we go deeper, make no mistake that this isn't going to be some highly explosive tell-all type of story about how a child of a big-time celebrity makes you look at that celeb in a whole new light. But honestly, given Bernie's demeanor even while on stage and on camera, his parenting style shouldn't be all that surprising. In short, this isn't some adopted daughter of Joan Crawford confession, but rather the confession of a daughter recognizing her father's parental mistakes and is in no way intended to bash the original king of comedy. Now that PSA is out of the way, let's continue on with the rest of the video. Je'Niece recounted how Bernie raised her, speaking on the notion of having to walk on eggshells around her dad, which mimicked how she'd behave within her own marriage. If Bernie wasn't happy, then they all were unhappy. She also recalled the times when her dad would call her demeaning words and often chastise her for refusing to put the pause on people. One incident being with her fellow schoolmate. His rage-filled tangents and irritable frustrations led to Je'Niece's fight or flight response to be triggered and overactive even when signs of a threat weren't present. Needless to say, she suffered with a bit of anxiety. Another incident she'd spoken about had taken place on a school bus. A bully who happened to be a boy had been picking on her for quite some time and eventually would give her 5 fingers to the face. Je'Niece did what any other child would do. She ran and told her parents, in this case her dad, who'd end up finding the snotty-nosed little boy and cussing him out from A to Z. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but he did yell at the boy, defending his child before yanking Je'Niece off the bus and flipping the switch on her for not defending herself. Describing herself as an introspective individual, she often journaled as a kid to better understand herself and figure out her emotional struggles and feelings in pursuit of determining the culprit pertaining certain emotions. Being able to reassess her emotions by flipping back and skimming through past entries she'd made in order to see how far she had actually come emotionally was one of the ways she not only coped with her father's anxiety-inducing style of parenting, but also challenged her so-called weekend soft spots. During the podcast, she disclosed that for a long time, she wasn't so sure on whether or not she herself wanted to become a parent, because if she'd take that leap of faith, she would be hesitant and think she couldn't parent her child to the best of her ability. In other words, she was afraid of making the same mistakes that her parents had made. When Je'Niece gave birth to her own daughter, she still felt some type of way toward her dad, oftentimes than not struggling to let that hurt go, and knew she genuinely couldn't get the closure she so desperately wanted until she resolved at least some of the pain she had been carrying. Eventually, she'd made the tough decision to write Bernie a letter expressing her feelings she had been internally battling, further attempting to heal her father wound by going on a fast. While pregnant, she reminisced about her and Bernie's relationship and knew he wasn't the ideal father that she'd wanted, the one you could concoct in a lengthy create-a-sim session, but he was now about to be a grandfather, so she took it upon herself to accept him for who he was, the mortal human being who was bound to make hella mistakes, which aided in the pent-up aggression she'd felt for so long dissolving. Following his death, it isn't clear whether or not Bernie actually had read Je'Niece's letter, but she did disclose that he was there to support her in her time of need, comforting her, and even showing her physical affection. And it didn't stop there. Bernie took it upon himself to apologize for his past actions and harsh treatment toward Je'Niece. Before his unfortunate and sudden passing in 2008, the two were able to make amends and calculate a closer friendship and that father-daughter bond Je'Niece had desperately wanted. Following the podcast discussion, people began debating on whether or not Bernie's style of parenting was in fact actually harsh or even slightly neglectful. Some seem to believe that this is all a normal upbringing in a Black household, while others argue that this style of parenting is a form of verbal and emotional abuse that teaches your child to fear you instead of respect you. More studies are being done, new knowledge is being absorbed, and we're all learning that perhaps maybe some of our parents' parental styles and habits weren't necessarily the best. Now that Je'Niece's own daughter is an adult, Je'Niece relishes in the fact that her daughter is quite similar to Je'Niece herself. Not everyone is a fighter or about that life, and that is a-okay. Bernie was teaching his child to be strong and independent, but Je'Niece ended up pushing back on that stereotype, instead replacing it for a more soft, delicate, and feminine approach. When Je'Niece's own daughter comes home from college, she's able to relax and be 1,000,000,000% herself around her mother, which is something Je'Niece is very proud of. Je'Niece's daughter turned out to be exactly what she had hoped, to be her most authentic self around her parents. Following Bernie's death, Je'Niece feels complete and can honestly say that her father gave her the closure and peace she had desperately craved all along. Now, before you start bringing out your pitchforks, I'd like to reiterate what I said in the middle of this video. In no way is Je'Niece coming out of the woodwork to shame her father, but solely to speak on her personal parental wounds as a result of Bernie's tough love parenting. Whether you agree with his parental style or not is entirely up to you, but we're all for people speaking their truths, even if it may be against the popular opinion. Je'Niece was able to find closure and heal from her childhood traumas, something many of you watching could also benefit from, eh? I'm just the messenger. How do you feel about Bernie Mac's parenting style? Let us know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments section, and stay tuned for more true celebrity stories.